Guys, the TD Hi65 group buy is ending in a couple of days on the 20th, so if you're interested in this keyboard, check it out in the links down below. But in this video, we're going to go over everything you need to know about this keyboard, what comes inside the box, and what it sounds like, so let's get into it. So this is what the case looks like. Very nice metal finish with a matte coating on it. You've got the brass weight on the back. You've got a USB-C port in the middle. We've got some nice rounded edges, a caps lock indicator, a cutout for the 2 extra keys on the right hand side along with the logo. Next we have the polycarbonate plate and the hot swappable PCB. There's also a separate daughter board for the USB-C port that's connected via this cable, and you get 2 of them. So if you decide to get this keyboard, you've got a lot of options. First off, for colors, you've got Tibetan black, you've got pink, and you've got off-whites. Next you have hot swappable or soldered, and then you have 3 different mounting methods that you can choose from. First you have the top mount, then you have the gasket mount, and a leaf spring tray mount. And for the keyboard that we have here today, it's going to be the gasket mount version. This keyboard comes with a brass weight that's already screwed into the case, but you get an additional polycarbonate weight as well. And surprisingly, there are LEDs at the bottom of the motherboard, so if you do choose to have the polycarbonate weight, you can get some LED action. Side note here, let's just all agree that putting LEDs at the bottom of a keyboard where it's going to be covered 100% of the time when the keyboard's being used is a dumb idea. If you're going to be using LEDs, they're either going to be on the side or up top. That's the best way to use LEDs. And even with this particular Hi65 with the transparent badge that's included, you're not going to be able to see the LEDs anyways, so might as well just not put them in the PCB. But let's move on. Lastly, we have our stabilizer holders, our gasket pour-on foam, our rubber feet, and some case foam that go beside the daughter board. You also get a full foam kit with 2 different thicknesses for case foam, PCB foam, PE foam, and also 2 different thicknesses for plate foam as well, which is pretty insane. Now let's start building, and the first thing we need to do is connect the PCB to the daughter board and make sure the keyboard is actually working. And since this is the hot swap version, I can take a switch and put it into every single socket and press down to make sure that they all actuate properly. This is my preferred method, but you may like to use the tweezer method, but it's all personal preference. Now let's open up the keyboard so we can start working inside of it. And just like other premium keyboards, hex screws are used because they don't strip like Phillips screws. And here's our workspace for the Hi65. And just like all other gasket mount keyboards, putting on the pour-on foam is the first step, and the density of this foam is pretty mild. Now when it comes to applying pour-on foam in a gasket mount keyboard, this is one of the things I dread because I'm a perfectionist and I always try to make it as straight as possible or fit it in the space that's been given. And with the Hi65, you can see that there's not much room, so having the pour-on be flush with the metal is kind of difficult, and it'll take a bit of time to have it completely straight. But generally it's not a big deal if the foam peaks slightly outward because the gasket foam will still do its job just fine. So these are all the parts needed to build the keyboard, and the first thing we're going to do is screw in the USB-C daughter board into the case. Next, I'm going to lay down the thicker case foam onto the bottom because I like more sound dampening properties. You can also add those foam pads from earlier because I completely forgot about them. Now moving to the PCB, it features south-facing hot swappable sockets with 5-pin support, no LEDs, screw-in stabilizers, and you can see quite a few flex cuts that are used for the tray mount version of this keyboard. And we'll be using our trusty Durock V2 screw-in stabilizers lubed with Krytox 205 Grade 0. It's the same sequence as usual where we lube the housing first, then the bars, and put them together. I'm also going to be putting the stabilizer holders, which are supposed to make the stabs sound clackier, aka the opposite of a dampener. They're surprisingly difficult to keep on during the installation process, but I kept them on because I wanted to hear how they sounded, but you can definitely not use them as well. Side note, I love the fact that Durock stabs give you ring dampeners so you can tighten the screws a little more without the worry of damaging your PCB. Once all the stabs are successfully installed, it's time to test them with some switches and keycaps to make sure there's no stab rattle because nobody wants that. And once that's out of the way, we can move on to the assembly process. So these are all the mounting screws that we get. Now according to the manual, I'm supposed to be screwing these brass standoffs into the case, but it doesn't really make sense for a gasket mount keyboard. So I'm primarily only going to be using this bag of screws for this build. So the top 2 pieces are going to be screwed onto the plate as a standoff, and that bottom screw is going to be used to connect to the PCB. And that top screw taper is going to match perfectly with the indent on the plate. There are a total of 7 screws, and once that's complete, we can move on to the next step, which is putting in the PE foam onto the PCB. And I would highly recommend using the PE foam because it just makes the keyboard sound that much better. And when you are using the PE foam, make sure all the holes are aligned, especially that space bar because it isn't aligned. Then it's going to be putting down the plate foam, and once again I am opting to put in the thicker foam because I like having more sound dampening properties. And finally we can put down the foam and use the standoffs as alignment pins through the foam to the screw holes so we can connect the entire assembly to the PCB. Now before we put in the switches, you might have noticed that the PE foam doesn't have holes for the sockets. But when you build this keyboard, you'll find that that won't be a problem because the pins go straight through without any issues. They'll be completely bend free assuming you use 5-pin switches. And the switches that we're going to be using are the cow switches with the ump stems lubed with Krytox 205 grade 0. Honestly, building in a hot swappable keyboard is one of my favorite things because you can put the switches in really easily and immediately start using the keyboard to make sure that the switches are working. And with the combination of 5-pin support PCBs and 5-pin switches, aligning your switches is super easy and the chances of bent pins is basically 0. And when I was putting the switches in, I didn't have a single bent pin, and that's in addition to not being able to see the sockets because of the PE foam, so I thoroughly enjoyed that. Now the last step before assembly is to make sure all the switches are working when the keyboard is connected, and now that I know that everything works, we can finally close up the keyboard. But wait, I can't close up the keyboard just yet because I'm still missing that last piece of PCB foam to max out the sound dampening in this keyboard. And now we can close up the keyboard for the final phase. Alright, so before putting on the keycaps, I'm sure you guys noticed already that I missed one of the stabilizers, and that's because I didn't realize that this keyboard has a full-sized right shift key. But for me, I don't really use the right shift key, so I'm not going to go back and put some stabilizers back on there, even though I have a full set of stabilizers, because that's just not a key I worry about. All I care about is the left shift, the delete key, the enter key, and the spacebar. So I'm just going to continue with the build. And the keycaps that we're using are the GMK white on black Katakana from Drop, currently with a $25 discount with immediate shipping. This keycap set is just solid with its double shot properties and clean design choice. And even though I don't know a lick of Katakana, I can still function with these keycaps because I'm a touch typist and muscle memory helps me navigate through these keycaps with no issues whatsoever, which is why you guys should learn the skill too. And it also helps you type faster. The build is now complete, so now let's listen to what it sounds like. So when typing on this keyboard, it sounds absolutely amazing to me. It's solid, it's clean, there's no ping, and thanks to that PE foam, you're getting that nice marbly, clacky sound that everyone seems to love. Now I know there are a couple people who are starting to get bored of the whole marbly sound, the whole PE foam thing, but that's the beauty of building a keyboard, right? You don't always have to put the PE foam in, even though it's included in the box. And instead, you can just build yourself a regular gasket mount keyboard with a solid sound thanks to all that sound dampening foam. And last but not least, with QMK and VIA compatibility, you have endless customizability at your fingertips. You've got endless remapping of keys, secondary functions, multiple layers, and macro building to customize this keyboard to suit your personal preferences. And check out the final build. Look at this keyboard. It looks absolutely amazing. Nice and stealthy, nice and cool looking with the Katakana font. And with the switches, you get a nice little accent of color, which makes it look really nice too. And I think you guys will really love this keyboard. Overall, building in the Hi65 has been an awesome experience, and I love the customizability that comes within it. First off, we've got sound dampening for days, right? We've got case foam, PCB foam, plate foam, PE foam, not to mention all the pour-on foam for the gasket mount. Also, I love the fact that they give you two different thicknesses for the case foam and plate foam, which means you can change the amount of sound dampening that you want in the keyboard. And I'm pretty sure with the thinner foam, you actually get a little more room within the keyboard for a little more flex if that's something you're looking for in a keyboard. So yeah, the Hi65 is a really great keyboard that you should check out. You've got nice customizability, good flexibility, and really good build quality. And for $300, it's not a bad price. And if you have any questions about this keyboard, let me know in the comments down below and I will answer them as soon as I can. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.